Okay, hello everyone and welcome to F4S Digital Events and today's Career Masterclass. Thank you all for being with us today. Our guest speakers joining us today will tell their career stories, and then we will invite the audience at home, which is comprised of students who are beaming into this webinar from up and down the country to ask questions. My name is Neelam Jagate and I will be hosting the session today. By sharing insights and lessons and career guidance, we hope to motivate and inspire young people that are joining us today to help them make informed decisions about their future. So to the audience at home, thank you so much for being with us today. Your audio and your video and the chat function has been disabled purely for safeguarding reasons, but you can still interact with us using the Q&A function. So please do ask questions. And we are recording this session as well, so it will be featured on our YouTube channel in due course. So yeah, please do sit back and enjoy the webinar, and if you would like to make notes at home, then please do so. So first of all, let me start by thanking the guest speakers today for giving up your time and for agreeing to share your inspiring career stories. So today in the hot seats, we've got Nadia Woodhouse, Katie Blainey and Jim Close joining us and sharing your career story. So thank you very much for being with us. So without further ado, I'll just quickly explain the structure of the webinar. So we're going to spend, each guest speaker will spend about 7-8 minutes talking about their journey, and then that will spark questions from the audience, and we'll move over to the Q&A towards the end of the session. Okay, so please do ask as many questions as you like, and I will try my very best to cover all those questions during the webinar. We're gonna kick off. So Nadia, would you mind starting off? So we just love to know a little bit more about you and how you have progressed from, let's say, college or university, and how it's taken you, well, how it's brought you to where you are today. Take it away.
Great, thanks Neelam, and hi everyone, and really great and happy to be here with you today. My name's Nadia, and I wanted to give you a little bit of an insight into my career journey, but I also at the same time wanted to maybe leave you with 3 kind of principles or things that have helped me make decisions throughout this period from university all the way up to where I am now. And I was thinking about this morning over a cup of tea, and I was thinking about, well, what are these 3 things that have helped to guide me? And one of them really is around being open and curious. So asking questions and really just understanding what's going on in the world. One is around, I thought, being impactful or knowing your purpose as well. And that takes a long time, and that's not very clear for many of us, maybe even ever, but just kind of asking those questions around, what am I here to do, and what do I really care about? And I guess the other one that I was thinking about was authenticity as well, being true to myself, listening to what my heart says, and also listening to what my head says. And I think those 3 things have served me really well. And I wanted to just share a couple of stories. I'm not going to take you through the whole career, but I wanted to share a couple of stories with you that kind of, when I was reflecting on these kind of principles about how this has sort of helped me through my career. So I work for Ernst & Young, and I actually started my career 14 years ago with Ernst & Young as well. They're now known as EY, so I might refer to them as EY throughout the talk, but I've left that company 3 times. I've joined them 4 times, left 3 times. So I've had zigzags in and out of this organization. And I never really, you can never really project that. It's a really big company, so there's lots of different opportunities. But when I started, or when I was making these decisions about what I wanted to do at university, I had absolutely no idea. Back 14 years ago, we had actually a book, a really big book, and you'd flip through all the courses. I only knew that I really loved nature, really connected to nature, loved the environment. And my father at the time also said, you should probably do something to do with business, because that's kind of, where the world is headed. And it's a foundational, important a course. And I wasn't quite sure about the business thing, but I thought, well, I'll take some advice and I'll also follow my passion. And believe it or not, the idea of sustainability or business sustainability wasn't a thing back then. It wasn't even, I never even thought I'd be able to combine the 2. So I started out and I did these 2 degrees. As you can maybe tell by my accent, I'm from Australia. So back there we have, you're about 17 years old, you make your decisions about college or university or a vocational career. So it was about 17 when I decided to do environment, and I decided to do commerce studies at university. Never I thought the twain shall meet, and they really didn't until about 3 years into my career. So I picked the commerce and business side, and that's where I first started my career at EY. It was known as, I guess, an audit firm or accounting firm back then. And about 3 years in to that career, I remember being at my client, which was a mining company, gold mining company, and I was looking in at finances, and my job was to make sure all the finances are all right. And I remember looking outside going, there's a mighty big hole in the ground, and there's a lot of like habitat destruction, a lot of species destruction, and this thing isn't adding up for me. And I feel like that was just, I wanted to share that story because that was just a really small moment, but for me it was quite a big moment when I realized, wow, I wasn't really following my heart. I was kind of just following, you know, the thing that people told me to do. I don't regret a second of, you know, the choices that I made in terms of the commerce and the accounting, because it's actually set me up really, really well for the rest of my career. But at that point, I decided to go back to uni and do a master's in climate change policy, which, as you probably know, is really, you know, really important, and there's so much media, rightly so, about it these days. I was really passionate about that, and that was about 8 years ago. And so I think for me, that has led to my kind of second principle of impact and purpose, and kind of knowing what I've kind of why I'm here. And for me, that's about positively impacting the communities and the environment around me. And I've tried now to merge the business side and the science side together. And we do have something called sustainability now, and I'm sure you've all heard of it. And we have ethical businesses. And so in my career, I was able to kind of make a little bit of a switch about 5 years in after coming back from uni, and going into climate change consulting, which I absolutely love. About 4 years after that, I decided I needed a little break, and decided to go traveling. And you know, the world that we live in right now means that travel is not possible at the moment, but that will change, and we will be able to travel again and experience new cultures and new ways of living. And I think for me, that one, I took a year off, and not everyone can do that, but for me, I was able to take a year off and really just kind of sit back and think about what I wanted to do. And I also got my yoga teacher training then. So right now, if you ask me what I do at work, I am a climate change consultant. I write articles about climate change and governance and sustainability, but I also teach yoga at EY as well. And I work 2 days a week with a charity called B Corporations. They're certified ethical businesses. I really believe in the power of business to change the world. And so I guess for me, I kind of wanted to be, have my home self the same as the person that I bring to work. I didn't want to go to work and just be one type of person and then come home and be somebody else. So for me, it's important to kind of demonstrate that I guess weaved through 3 different types of roles and careers into my work. And so I guess the final point that I wanted to leave you with was around that first principle around openness and curiosity. This idea that you know, being open or asking for opportunities is a really good thing. You might not know where your journey or your travel will take you, you know, across your career path, but just start somewhere and be open to these opportunities, and be open to the way that the world is changing right now. I think that after COVID pandemic, you know, we'll be focusing a lot more on communities. Technology is massive now and is coming up to be more and more important. I think we will start to value our frontline workers and NHS workers the similar way in which we value our CEOs. So be aware of how the world is changing, and listen to what makes you tick and makes you excited. So I'll pause there.
Thank you so much. Just to touch on sustainability before we move over to Katie, just because I'm just thinking about any young person that might be tuned in thinking, well, what does that actually mean? And I think a lot of us do understand that as the bigger picture, but you know, in like 60 seconds, can you just define that sustainability and what you do to have that, to sort of contribute?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So sustainability for me is making sure that whatever resources we use and whatever we do um, will be able to sustain us into the long term, so that what after my generation is gone, that the planet will still be operating within the constraints or the amount of resources that we have. So previously we lived in a world where we were using heaps and heaps of oil or resources to create consumer products. And now I think we're waking up to the fact that the earth and the planet is finite, and that our both our earth resources and our ability to kind of produce as human beings is finite. And so we need to find another way of living as well. So if I had to sum it up, yeah, future living in a way that sustains future generations after us.
Thank you. Very nice and clearly explained. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, Nadia. We are going to let the audience just sort of ponder on that, and then please do ask questions, guys, those of you at home. And in the meantime, we're going to move over to Katie. Katie, same sort of question for you. We'd love to hear about your career journey and sort of how you got started and how you are where you are now.
Okay, I'm Katie Blainey. I'm a publishing director for RS Assessment from Hodder Education. And so I'm going to tell you a bit about where I work, about my early career, and a bit about the publishing industry, how it's changing, and then a bit about what I enjoy about my role. Which is the second house in the UK after Penguin, which you might well have heard of. We're a very large commercial creative company based in London at Blackfriars and have about 1,000 people working with us. We've actually got offices as well in the Caribbean, Singapore, in Scotland as well. So we have a vision to make content or make it easy for people everywhere to access new worlds of learning and entertainment, which means we create all sorts of print and digital content for consumers. And I work in the education part in the education division. So we produce all sorts of things like revision books, teacher guides, magazines, you name it really, for primary, secondary schools and colleges. So my role there as publishing director is for the assessment part of the business. So I have a team of people who work as publishers and product managers and editorial there. So how did I end up there? So I grew up in Southampton. I went to a state secondary school and then I went on to a separate college. I studied English language, geography, maths and general studies for my A-level. I decided to go to university. I was very lucky that I was able to do that because I was the first in my family to do so. I went to Kingston in sort of just outside of London. And I really struggled to know what to study because I did actually enjoy all my A-levels, but I chose English in the end, English language and linguistics, with a little bit of economics thrown in as well, managed to find a module. And I also worked while I was there. I did a lot of, as everybody does, works in shops and pubs, but also did a bit of temp work in offices as well, because I thought it'd be good to get that experience of working in an office, because I thought I'd probably want to go and do that. So early on in my career, I knew I wanted to, or had an interest anyway, in working in the creative industries. So once I'd left university, I started applying, actually probably not before I'd even finished, applying to things like in publishing and marketing roles. And a really interesting editorial role came up. And like Nadia, actually, I went straight to that, to my company from university, and I have been and left and come back. So it's a very nice company to work in. And so my first job was working with maths textbooks. Didn't expect to, but it sounded interesting. It sounded creative. It sounded fun. And actually, this was quite interesting for me because I had a maths A-level, which meant it stood out for me because a lot of people applying into creative industries have traditionally English and humanities subjects and maybe are English and humanities graduates, but the fact I had maths was quite interesting. So I think sort of one piece of advice I've always would say is try and keep your options open if you're not sure. So when you're picking your A-levels, you know, it is good to have a bit of breadth because you never really know. Do the things that you enjoy. So that job was really good to give me new skills, so things like editorial and project management, but also it's all the things that I'd learned as I was growing up. You know, the skills I'd already had, I was able to bring with me. So things like my communication skills, I could work to deadlines and plan my time. I was able to work in a team, but also work on my own and use my initiative. So I worked in editorial for not that long because I started to have quite an interest in the wider business. and I was interested in the sort of creative side of it and actually coming up with the ideas. So I wanted some management and responsibility, and I wanted to be involved in the commercial side, you know, the actual commercial side of the business and helping grow the business. So I moved into a commissioning role. And that was me commissioning textbooks to start with, and it was science textbooks was my first commissioning role. And that's basically commissioning resources and textbooks for use in secondary schools. And really that meant I had responsibility for growing our textbooks for science, and growing market share, selling more, creating more revenues, more profits. But it was also quite creative as well. So I was having to shape the list and the ideas that we were coming up with. And actually this commissioning role has stuck with me all the way through to now in my publishing director role as well, with aspects that I come back to and use, you know, every week. So things like researching and understanding the market and customers and the consumers of our product is so important. Pitching ideas for new products, which is really exciting. Looking for authors, finding experts to write for us, the best people. Briefing and planning out projects, looking for, you know, might be coming up with what features we want in a revision book, or coming up with what digital resources we want for a Spanish course, you know, so quite varied. The budgetary side of it as well, so how much is it going to cost to produce, you know, making sure we're producing a book that's actually going to be profitable ultimately, thinking about how many we might want to sell or might be able to sell. And then actually working with a team of people that would then produce the book and or produce the resource, the digital resource. So that's all the things that underpin that role. And I've all along my career, I've just said yes to lots of things. I've always been interested in doing new things. So that's been, so actually I've ended up commissioning all sorts of things that I knew nothing about. Economics books, French books, politics. We've even I've produced a reading scheme for reception and Key Stage 1 children. And I think that's something else is just, for me, it's helped me get me where I am, was just, you know, being interested and always wanting to learn and try new things. So that's where I ended up looking after the assessment part of our business about 5 years ago. And I never thought I'd be an assessment publishing director, that's for sure. But the maths background came in really, really handy. My team develops tests that are used in about 6,000 primary schools that teachers use to sort of better understand children's learning, better understand where they are. And actually the really important thing that is part of my role now is the digital side. So we don't produce anything that doesn't have a digital element, whether it's an interactive test, whether it's a report that goes with it that supports the print test. And I think that's the one thing I wanted to say about is in terms of how things are evolving. You know, when I first started in publishing, it was in 2001, and a team used to consist of a publisher, marketing, sales and editing, but now it's not. And part of my role has been thinking, what skills do we need in the business? What new roles do we need to make sure that we're a future facing business and can keep up with the demands of what schools and teachers need? You know, we've now got digital project managers. We have quality assurance analysts, we have subscriptions marketing executives, you know, roles that we just didn't have when I first started. You know, in terms of the educational publishing industry, 20% of sales are now digital. So we have to make sure that we've got the right people to be able to create those products. So really in our team now, we're always learning, always finding things we don't know, which is excellent. And always good to then work out how we you know, fill that gap. So we need to make sure we've got more people that are analytical and understand data, who can problem solve and collaborate and innovate. But we still need to be good communicators, to be able to research and to be able to strong.
Sorry, the audio isn't. I think you're kind of in and out there, Katie. But I got what you were trying to sort of get at in terms of the jobs of tomorrow. I've actually got quite a few questions already coming in, and I've personally got quite a few questions, Katie, as well, about sort of the skills and how, you know, how you've had to evolve as well. So we will we'll hold on to those, and we'll move over to Jim before we sort of go into the Q&A, if that's okay. So Jim, again, you know, similar, you know, questions for you as well. How did you get to where you are today, and just share a little bit about your experiences as well, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, well, I'm Jim. I'm a regional vice president in a software company that you'll never have heard of. So I work in the technology sector, and I work in a very specific part of that called enterprise software. So what enterprise software is what big businesses use, like EY, to basically make their business operate. So at home you will use word processor, email, you might use computer games. This is the boring stuff that sits behind the scenes that nobody ever really sees, and it's not bought by the public. So we sell business to business. And I've arrived here, I guess, a bit by design and a bit by luck and chance along the way. If you'd have asked me when I was at school what I was going to do, this would definitely not have been on the list of things that I do. So I manage a small team. I've had a number of different roles throughout my career, but I went to grammar school. I left during my A-level course because I wanted to get out and earn some money, and I joined a bank. I joined Barclays Bank, and I had an office job there and in a desk role, and I went and joined Barclays because they invested in people, and they trained me and provided me with a day off a week to go to college, and I did my banking exams. And eventually in banking, you either have a desk job for life, you ended up as a trader in the city, or you went into what was called in those days management services, which is basically IT. Now, my school career, I was quite scientifically oriented, so I was good at maths. I did the sciences, and I was doing the science courses for my A-levels. So I went into IT. I had a very basic job to start off with, but again, Barclays invested in me, and I stayed there for a number of years before I was approached to go and work for another company, and it had never occurred to me to change jobs. At that time, it was just something where an opportunity arose, and I thought that sounds interesting. I'll go and have an interview and see what it's all about. It was a promotion for me, and I went to work for Boots in Nottingham. So I moved halfway across the country. I had a job which was a bit boring, actually, if I'm honest, but it moved me up the role, moved me up the ladder, and what it did do is give me the first exposure into management, but I never really settled in the role. And somebody showed me a job one day, which was another promotion, bearing in mind this was 6 months later, and said I should go and apply for it. And so I remember writing the letter now, and it was a letter saying, I'm probably not qualified for this job, but I'm quite interested in your company. And I got a response back saying, come and have an interview. And they told me I was overqualified for the job, and when could I start? And I moved up, I became a manager. I had a team. In fact, I had 3 teams of people that were reporting into me. And I helped British Oxygen set up some new data centers in Woking at the time, and then Guildford. And it was interesting, it was challenging, but it became dead man's shoes to move on. And one feature of my career is I get bored fairly quickly. Once I know how to do a job, when you've been doing it for a couple of years, I get bored and I need a new challenge. And so somebody came to me and said, why don't you come and join this technology company I'm working for? So I moved into the software business. So having worked in IT, I then went into the companies that provide the IT solutions. And I was a techie. I was doing an engineering job. I was installing software, giving training courses. And I was surrounded by all these young guys driving better cars than me and seemingly earning more money. And I thought, well, I can do that. Why don't I go into sales? So I took the leap. I went into sales. It took me a couple of years to get to grips to it. But then I discovered I could do it. I was actually quite good at it. I liked the interaction. I liked the challenging nature of the role. There's always a problem to solve, and the rewards can be very good. So I stayed at an American software company. I stayed there for 13 years in the end before finally I felt, okay, I'm now getting bored with this, but it's quite a challenging environment to work in. I then worked for a small software company as the chief executive. That was tough, but it taught me a lot about running a business in a recession, cash flow, and how a business actually works. I moved from there to a German software company. with a leadership role. I was a country manager, so I had, I don't know, a couple of hundred people and £100 million business reporting into me, so quite a responsibility. And again, challenging, good fun, and I quite like the softer side of the job there, of managing people and leadership and providing that leadership as opposed to the pure selling side. And then I've kind of moved on in a succession of companies since then. My current company, I've been here now for 5 years. I run a relatively small team. I'm probably overqualified for the job, although my boss will hate me saying that. But I could probably do my boss's job, having been there before. And of course, I think I can do the CEO's job as well. But it's an interesting world. It's quite challenging. As I say, the rewards are good. But I think if you look back at my career, who does it suit? People perhaps who, you can get into it through the technology route, but we employ people who do administrative roles, do sales roles, do technical roles, all aspects of the company. And it's quite an interesting and rewarding environment. And generally, they can be quite good, fun places to work as well in the software business. So 3 takeaways, I would say, be prepared to change jobs, to move up. Don't be satisfied with what you've got. You're probably better than you think you are. I've learned that throughout my career. You have a tendency to be quite self-deprecating. And then, great careers and enjoyable careers can come purely by accident and luck. They don't always have to be by design. You don't have to decide, I'm going to be a doctor and that's all I'll ever be. Things can happen. If you don't know what you want to do now, then things will come along.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing, Jim. I really enjoyed the sort of your takeaways there, and I'm sure we've got lots of questions coming in. In fact, I have got one directly for you, Jim. So let's start off with you. So we'll go into the Q&A. So anyone at home sitting and watching and listening, if you've got a question, now's your time. Now's a chance to bob those questions in the Q&A function box. So Jim, what is your top tip for being a good manager of other people? And that's by someone anonymous. But what I might add to that, how are you? I mean, what does good leadership look like to you, as well?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. It's a very, very long answer. So to try and sum it up, I would say biology gives you the answer. 2 ears, 1 mouth. It's listen to people around you.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And let's go over to Nadia. Nadia, which A-levels did you study?
So my A-levels, and I didn't study in the UK, but we have something very similar in Australia. So I did a lot of STEM subjects. I did physics. I did earth and environmental science, which is all about geology and systems processes around like how water circulates around the earth, things like that. I did a maths, quantitative maths subject. I did Japanese, which wasn't that useful, but it was really nice. I traveled to Japan and could speak Japanese, which was good, and English literature.
Excellent. So it seems, so Katie and Nadia, you both did maths, sort of further maths and sort of A-level or in higher education, it seems. I mean, we have a project, Maths for Girls, and we, as a charity, we are trying to reduce the stigma attached with, maths being a predominantly male subject. I mean, what do you, in your experience, why are these barriers? Why do they exist, and what more can we do, Katie, to break these barriers that exist in society regarding maths and female studying maths?
I think there's the good things that, like Maths for Girls and people going around as role models and talking in schools, making sure that primary age children understand that maths is it's not, you don't have to have it as a career, but have it, and making sure you keep your options open and keep it in your skill set is important, and all the way through. But I think there's also something to do with parents as well, because I think a lot of parents say they can't do maths. That's not a thing. We could all do maths. It's just our attitude. So I think there's also a place to play there in terms of getting parents a bit more confident and to support their children.
Right. Excellent, thank you. And another one for Katie. Katie, could you do your job without having undertaken maths A-level, would you reckon? You have to
Yes.
excuse me because the rain's coming down. I've got to open my window.
Yeah, I know, definitely. I mean, maths, because I ended up working on maths textbooks, it was very handy for me. But I have people in my team that just have a GCSE in maths, but they're learning all the time. They have an open mindset that they want to be able to understand what they, how to work with data, how to work with numbers, and therefore they put their mind to it and make it work. So yeah, you definitely don't need to have a maths A level. And I think you learn a lot of things on the job and pick up training along the way.
Thank you. Where should we go next? We've got lots of questions. I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. The next question is, did you take business in high school? If not, what was the way that you got into the job, and do you enjoy what you do? I think I'm going to ask Jim that question, if that's okay. If you want me to repeat any of the questions, do let me know.
That's fine. So I did sciences at school, and then when I joined Barclays, I was doing what is effectively a business studies degree, although it was called the Association of the Institute of Bankers exams at those days. So that was commerce, economics, how businesses work, accounting, those kind of things. It was a good grounding for business, I think, to understand the mechanics of how a business works.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nadia, do you think there is going to be a growing number of jobs in the environment sector in the future? I know you touched on that before, but is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's a great question. And I absolutely do think there will be an evolving need for jobs in environment and sustainability. I think particularly in the waste industry, as I touched on before, we only have one planet and we only have a finite amount of resources, and we're throwing a whole lot of stuff away. And so if you can start to convert waste into resources, and I don't mean like toilet waste, but that is also something that's happening, you convert that into energy, or if you can convert, in the recycling industry, food waste, that is, I feel that's quite an interesting kind of topic, because waste is now equaling opportunity and money. So yeah, definitely it will be growing.
Excellent, thank you. And another one for Nadia, if that's okay. Did you always know you wanted to live and work abroad when you were in school?
I think so. My parents were always kind of taking me on trips and traveling. So I was really lucky in that respect. And obviously living in Australia, I don't know if you know any Australians, but we like to travel because we're so far away, we need to see the rest of the world. So I definitely always had that need to kind of go and see other things. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Another one for Jim. What do you think were the most important skills that you brought to your jobs?
Along the way, well, you develop technical skills, and they're always useful. I think it's a good question. It's varied from job to job. I think I've got quite an inquiring mind, and I like to problem solve. So that probably comes from the science background. So I like to pick up the facts, understand them, mull them around, and then come up with an answer. And I think that that inquiring mind, the problem solving, has probably been the thing that I've drawn on the most over the years.
Sure. And
I'm very good with numbers, and I can spell.
That helps. Thank you. It seems like that's a similarity that all three of you have, actually, the sort of the curiosity, like you mentioned as well. Thank you. Katie, you mentioned that you were always thinking about the future of your business. What skills do you think are needed in the future for business? Another really good question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, actually, and I think that's quite insightful. I think for us, I know my audio went a bit, but I was starting to say a bit about the kind of skills we do need. Yeah, I think we do need. I think what we need is in our business is a diverse range of people, as much as diverse as we can, that think differently, because for us, we're producing resources for consumers in the whole world, and everybody's different. So we need to make sure we have variety in what we produce. So I think people that are able to problem solve and collaborate is really important. So the analytical skills and actually the data skills, because there's in every industry now we are amassing a lot of data. Being able to actually work with that, understand it, know what it means, and then use it to produce even better resources in the future is going to be really important.
Excellent, thank you.
I don't know, I can pipe up there. I agree with that. The diversity in teams is really important. The team I've got at the moment, I'm really lucky. They all gel and they all get on really well, but they're all different in certain ways, and they all have strengths and weaknesses. And if you can bring together a team that all have different skills, now, not everyone needs to be brilliant at one particular thing because others can help them with it.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Thank you. Another one for Katie. Katie, how did you decide that you wanted to work for a large company rather than a small one?
I don't think I thought about it at the beginning. Definitely didn't. When for my first job, I wanted a job, I wanted to work, and the fact it was in publishing was fantastic. But now I've had more experience and worked with lots of people in bigger and smaller organisations. I've realised how different they are. We actually acquired a very small publisher, and I ended up being quite closely involved in it and managing some of the team. And I realised culturally how different a big and small company can be. And that has made me realise that there are strengths and weaknesses to both. And actually what it made me realise is the main thing is the people you're working with and your manager. I think that is, you really need to gel with and have the same outlook as everybody around you. Obviously diversity of thought within there, but you need to have the same place that you're all trying to get to and the way you want to get there. And I think that respect and support from a manager is really important, more so than the size of the business.
Okay, interesting. And I mean, you mentioned similarities and differences, and what do you, can you highlight some of those if you can?
So I think for us, a small and a big publisher, if we're producing resources for schools, we did the same things. We researched in the same way. We had the same ideas for kind of products, but the way that we communicated might be quite different. So in a small company, in this particular experience, the small company was very led by one, a few individuals would lead the company, whereas in a big company, you were quite autonomous. Right. And that's one way that I think we found quite some differences between them.
Excellent, thank you. Nadia, what made you interested in sustainability to sort of start off with? And how did you decide to do it as a career after going into accounting?
Yeah, good question. I guess I've always been interested and passionate about nature. I loved dinosaurs growing up, and I know it's not got much to do with sustainability, but this interest in the earth and how the earth works and the processes that happen and the systems that happen, I've always really been fascinated by that. And so the accounting was really good because it gave me a great background, but I always knew something was missing, like it wasn't quite right. Like I felt like it was a really solid career and it served me really well. But I think the shift for me was when I just sort of described that kind of moment of looking out at, looking at the books and the finances of a company, but then looking out and seeing what they were doing to the earth and not kind of matching that. And I wanted to change that. There was a real big shift in me that said, actually, I don't think this is fair, and I want to pursue a career in righting that wrong that I saw.
So you actually had to take quite a big risk and a leap of faith, really. Is that something that you would advise a young person in terms of, like, they could have opted for, I don't know, sciences at A levels, but actually have decided that they want to pursue a degree in fashion? And is that something that you'd endorse?
Oh, totally. You have to follow what your heart is saying. There's no wrong choices as well. Like, I think that, I don't regret any of the moments or any of the choices that I made. Like, it's all part of this one big journey. And one day you might wake up and go, actually, no. And I think, Jim touched on this as well. You can have many, many different careers. My parents had one, right? My dad was a pilot and that was it. But the world is changing so much. And I think as well, when you look at the resumes and the CVs of people now, every couple of years, people are moving and changing and moving with the world as well. So absolutely follow your heart as well.
Excellent advice. Jim, do you think coding would be a good skill to learn for getting a good job?
Yes, I think it's a very good skill to learn. Don't get hung up on the language, the particular programming language. It's more about structure. And again, it's understanding a business problem and then applying how you code, how you solve that business problem. So analysis and coding, yeah, very good entry into the industry.
Excellent. And another one for Jim as well, if that's okay. Someone's asking, I was going to take on a job in graphic design. what would I have to study? Any idea?
In graphic design, I don't really know, to be honest. I've got no graphic design element to my role. I would guess probably there's probably an element of the technical skills required, probably from art and those kind of things.
Yeah.
I mean, design you don't learn creativity. I think it's, you know, you've got it or you haven't. If you've got those ideas and you're encouraged to develop them, I think just being creative, you know, in itself is skill enough. Yeah, I think that's probably all I know on graphic design. I've never been asked a question on graphic design before.
Absolutely fine, thank you. And let's have a look. How are you all coping with working from home? And do you think more companies will now begin adopting this as the standard? Should we kind of just go around quickly? And Nadia, if I start with you, and then we'll work our way around.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm coping okay. It's amazing how now I just turn on my video straight away, whereas before, when I had the odd day at home, I never would have turned on my video, because we need that human connection. Yeah. I think absolutely we will be adopting this as a standard, or be able to be more flexible. At EY, the company where I work, we already had a flexible working approach, so we were able to work from home a lot as long as we were set up appropriately. And there's been some recent news that Tata Consulting Services in India, it's about 450,000 people, that they are going to actually adopt a 75% working from home in the future workforce. So we are going to see major changes as well. Yeah.
Interesting. And Katie, how are you finding working from home?
Yeah, I think probably very similar, actually. We already had a policy and lots of people work from home, but what we found was very challenging before was having one person at home, everyone else in the office. So for a meeting, it never worked. We could never get the tech to work, but now everybody's at home. It works so much better. So now we're talking about how do we keep that going? What are we going to do in the future to make it work better? Because we will be more flexible, and no doubt people will work at home a bit more. So what can we do to keep that going? But I think the other thing is, you know, the human contact. I think we're all missing that, but that will come back eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jim, how about you? How are you finding working from home? And
not dissimilar. We've had a working from home policy anyway, so I have a number of my team that work from their home office. The technology is easy enough; we're all familiar with it.
Yep.
It's actually the challenge is managing people working from home. So I'm lucky I've got quite a mature team, and I don't need to get involved in them day in, day out. But actually managing large groups of people through video conferencing is quite tricky, because when you can see them in the office, you wander over and you can have a quick chat at the desk. So that's, I guess we're developing those skills, and we're all learning how to do that now.
Yep, we're all adjusting, aren't we? And if I was going to make my own company, how long would I have to go to university for? Let's go to Katie. Any ideas?
See, I don't know if you do. Actually, you know, I remember we worked with someone who was studying his A-levels, had a great idea for a product, came to see us. We didn't end up working with him. He's now produced a couple of companies that he's sold, one to The Guardian. You know, he had that idea from his bedroom when he was 17, 18. He didn't need to go to university to set his business up. So I think, yeah, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be an entrepreneur, and you'll learn the skills however you want.
Excellent, thank you. We've got 2 more minutes left. So let's see if we can get through any more. Did you find that you chased opportunities, or did they present themselves to you? Nadia, thoughts?
Yeah, a bit of both, actually. I think that you have to have, I mentioned before, this kind of curious mindset. You've got to really put yourself out there as well to be someone that is considered for opportunities. So while I didn't feel like I was always chasing things, I was always putting my hands up for extracurricular things at the office, or for volunteering, things that I was passionate about. So I became, I suppose, known as the person that, you know, would consider an opportunity if presented to me. So a bit of both. You've got to do some work on yourself to be able to say, hey, I'm out there. And then some opportunities do come to you. Yeah.
Excellent. Sadly, we are out of time. 45 minutes just went by like that, but just want to close by thanking our guest speakers for such insightful and engaging discussions today. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say today was really a really good learning opportunity for the audience at home. I'm sorry if I couldn't answer all questions, but we were incredibly busy today. So thank you for all the amazing questions. You'll be asked to leave some feedback within sort of the next sort of 5-10 minutes once you leave this webinar. So please just let us know how we're getting on. The recordings will be on our YouTube channel at Founders for Schools. If you're not already following us, please do so on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, where everywhere. You can find us quite easily. Please continue to share our work amongst your friends and family. Our next webinar, our next career webinar will be on the 5th of May at 2 o'clock. So hopefully we'll see more of you then. Thank you again to our guest speakers, and thank you to the audience at home. Thank you so much. All the best with everything. Keep safe and take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.